Okay, Bruchim Habeim, welcome everyone. Schar Halicha today. It's not just coming. You have tremendous schar for coming. Schar Halicha. I must tell you a story that just happened, and I know if I repeat it now, because it just happened, I'll have it in my mind, and maybe you will too, and it's really, really worthwhile. We were all set to come to be early, no problem whatsoever. And we got into the car. My daughter, Henny, is here. And she drove us. For those of you who are into cooking, she writes a column in the Jerusalem Post called In the Kitchen with Henny, if you know anyone who's interested in that. But anyway, she commercial break. But anyway, we got in the car, and we're set to come, no problem, plenty of time. We get into the car, which is in the garage, and we come to the gate. You press a number, and the gate opens. She pressed the number, the gate didn't open. So she said, try your phone. I tried my phone, called the number, the gate's supposed to open, the gate did not open. For some reason, the mobile network did not connect with the number that we pressed to get. What do we do now? I'm stuck here. I can't get out of the garage. We're stuck in the car. What's going to happen? So we're waiting. All of a sudden, we see the gate at the other end of the garage is opening. Not the one we're going to, the other one. We had to back up, turn around, because someone else was going out of the garage. So they pressed their button, and the garage door opened. But we had to get there before the garage closed. And by the time we turned around, the garage is starting to close. And you know how the two doors go. They go like this, and they go like this, and it's about to close. And so she goes as close as she can, the second before the garage closes. And when she got close enough, sure enough, what happened? The garage doors opened up again. Right? And I'm thinking to myself, this is mamish like Ne'ilah and Yom Kippur, right? The gate's about to close. Or was it? Or my daughter said it. I don't remember. My daughter said it. She says it's like Ne'ilah. I said, I got a drasha for Ne'ilah. This is unbelievable. The gates are about to close. The doors are closing. But if you get close enough, it's going to open up again. Mamish, unbelievable. Can't forget that story. So if I say it, it'll stay in my head. Okay, so welcome everyone. What? Lo ninalu. Yeah, we weren't crying yet, but it was raining, so.
We would have been crying. If we wouldn't have gotten through that date, we might have started to cry.
It's funny. Okay. We spent 2 sessions on the introduction of Kol Yisrael Yesh Lahem Chelek Le'olam Haba, and why that was the introduction to Pirkei Avot. It gives us a tremendous amount of confidence to know that all of Israel has a share in the world to come. Shenemar v'amich kulam tzadikim le'olam yeshu oretz neitzer matoi ma'aseh yodai lehispoyer. Today we have the zchus of beginning the actual first Mishnah in the first parak of Pirkei Avot. And the first Mishnah, we're going to learn the Mishnah, we're going to say the whole Mishnah, and then we're going to analyze slowly but surely from the very beginning on what's going on in this particular Mishnah. So we have the zchus of beginning, and if you have a Pirkei Avot in front of you, fine. Otherwise, it's a short Mishnah. We'll speak out loud the Mishnah. Moshe kibel Torah misinai. Moshe, the word kibel, received or accepted. Moshe kibel Kabbalah saTorah. Moshe kibel Torah misinai. Moshe received the Torah from Har Sinai, from Mount Sinai. We'll discuss the wording after we finish the Mishnah. Then umisara liYehoshua. He then gave it over to his Talmud, Yoshua, and we'll see how that fits in. V'Yehoshua l'Zikanim, and Yehoshua gave it over to the elders, the men who were known as the Zikanim. Uzikanim l'Neviim, those who were known as the Zikanim, they gave it over to the next bearers of the Mesorah, to the Nevi'im. Now, notice that Moshe received the Torah from Sinai. But after that, it was Mesorah Yehoshua. He gave it over. Yehoshua doesn't say Kibel. Yehoshua received it as a Mesorah, as we have it today too. And Yehoshua to the Zikanim, and the Zikanim to the Nevi'im, Unevi'im Mesorua L'Anshe Knesset Agdola. The Nevi'im, the Zikanim gave it over to the Nevi'im, and the Nevi'im gave it over to the members of the Great Assembly, the Anshe Knesset Agdola. We'll discuss who they were as we go through point by point of the Mishnah. And now begins the concept that we discussed in the two introduction sessions about what Pirkei Avot is all about in terms of midos. And it says, Heim Amru Shlosha Devarim. They, the Anshe Knesset Agdola, said three things. Number one, Hevu Mesunim Badin. Be deliberate in judgment. Don't be so quick to pronounce judgment. Deliberate it carefully. Even though you might start applying some aphorisms, strike while the iron is hot, and so on. But when it comes to judgment, you have to be deliberate. You have to be careful not to jump to conclusions, because there are so many aspects of making a judgment that it's easy to fall into the pit of making a mistake. So first, have a masuna badin. Be careful, quiet when it comes to making judgments. V'amidu talmidim harbei, and do the best you can to increase the numbers of students that you have. It's clear that sometimes you can teach someone something, and that one little phrase, that one little idea that you give over can inspire that individual. And not only will you be inspiring that individual, but all the individuals that person comes in contact with. And you can actually create worlds of observant Jewish people just by a statement that you have by Ha'amidu Talmidim Harbei. And finally, Va'asu Siyog LaTorah. Make a little bit of a fence around the Torah. Protect the Torah. This concept of Asu Siyog LaTorah can be found in many of the rabbinic ordinances and many mitzvahs, the Rabbanon, that we have. We find throughout Shas that sometimes Chazal would make a certain halachic requirement in order to protect a deeper requirement, because one might lead to the other. So you have to make a siyag laTorah. We'll give examples of this as we get to the explanation in depth of each and every word of this particular Mishnah. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to have a little bit of a discussion here about the Mesorah, as we just said. Okay, there is an introduction to the Tanakh that is printed in the Mikros Gedolos Navi, and it goes through a series of all the names of the Mesorah. The Mesorah that we have, as we've explained, Kabbalah HaTorah and the Torah Shebiksav and Baal Peh. If you remember the first session that we had, and we gave the example from the Gemara in Shabbos about Hillel and Shammai. Any of you remember the example with the Aleph Beis? All right, let me review that. It's very important.
Some of us were not there.
What? Some of you weren't here.
Not at the session.
Okay, so let me refresh that, because this is crucial to the understanding of the entire system of Pirkei Avos that we're having. This is part of Torah Sheba'al Peh. So Torah Shebiksav, a lot of people say, well, Torah Shebiksav, yeah, it's easy. We know that that's authentic because it's written down, and when it's passed on to the next generation, they see what's written down, and they say, well, no, I received this from there, and that's the Masorah, because it's written. It's handwritten. How do you know Torah Sheba'al Peh? How do we know that Torah Sheba'al Peh is authentic? I mean, after all, it's oral law. And by the way, if you've ever studied Gemara, you know that even though the Gemara is written down, it's still Torah Sheba'al Peh. There's so much analyzation here in this particular Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi put this Mishnah together as part of Pirkei Avos, and we're walking blindly in what exactly this is speaking about. Here, look at the first line. Moshe kibel Torah misinai. So kibel means what? He accepted, right? When it came to Yoshua, did Yoshua have a Kabbalah? It doesn't say Yoshua had a Kabbalah. It says Umisara li Yehoshua. It doesn't say Yoshua kibel mi Moshe. Moshe got it from Sinai. He gave it over to Yoshua. Yoshua gave it over to someone else. It doesn't say anything about Kabbalah by them. Why didn't it say Hashem Mosar Torah le Moshe? Why did it say Moshe Kibel? What?
Why doesn't it say B'nai Yisrael?
Well, eventually we get through all the generations. That's true. Okay? But because if you take a look at the Shalshelis of the Masorah, the Rambam in his introduction explains what happened. And it's brought down in the Gemara also that Moshe got it from Hashem. Then he would teach it over to Aaron and Yoshua, sitting right next to him. They, in turn, would review it by teaching over to their children and to the next generation, and so on and so forth. And that's the Masorah. That's our Masorah, that everything came down from Moshe to us in a direct line descendancy in the family, or through Talmud, from Rebbe to Talmud, and Talmud to his Talmud, and so on and so forth, down to today. And parents, when they raise their children, they teach the Torah, and they say, we have a Masorah from our generations past, and this is the Masorah that's clear. But let's get back to our original question, which is how we know this authenticity, right? So people say when you have something written, it's clear as day. Because it's written, you can't change it. Bereshis bara Elokim is passed down from one generation to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. It's written, Bereshis bara Elokim. We know exactly what those words are. No question about it. There's a famous story in the Gemara and Shabbos. We're not going to read it now. We're just going to quickly run through it. There are three stories about Hillel and Shammai. I'm repeating this from the first session. But there are three stories about Hillel and Shammai, and a prospective convert, or according to the Marsha, a prospective Baal Tshuva, came to Shammai and he said, you know the famous story. What did he say? Teach me the Torah while I stand on one foot. Are you familiar with this story? Right? So he said to Shammai, teach me the Torah while I stand on one foot. And Shammai took he ripped out a beam from the ceiling, and the house did not collapse, by the way. He ripped out a beam from the ceiling, and he chased the guy with the beam, And he said, no, I can't teach you the whole Torah while you're standing on one foot. It's too much. And this business of 1 foot means that there's only one beam to the building. No, it's not so. So he chased him out. He said, you can't learn like this. He went to Hillel, and Hillel said, okay, you ready? Start standing on 1 foot, right? Okay, so he told him to stand like this. And he said, that, Madasani loch, l'savach losavid. He put it in the negative, by the way, because in the Torah it says, v'yahavta l'reacha kamocha. But when Hillel taught the perspective Baal Tshuva or convert, he didn't say, v'yahavta l'reacha kamocha. What did he say? Madasani loch, what's hateful to you, l'chavach losavid. Do not do unto others as you would not have others do unto you. At least that's what the English translation says. But basically that's what Hillel told him. He said, Madasani loch l'chavach losavid. That's the whole Torah.
Why in the negative?
Right? What?
Why in the negative?
Okay, good point. Right? He said, what's hateful to you, don't do to your friend. That's the Torah. Zil Gemor. Now go and learn. Of course, we have Yahavta l'recha kamocha, which is the positive. That's because we already have accepted the Masorah. And once you have a Torah, then you have a lot of positive things to give over. But when you don't have Torah, it's not as easy to understand. No, love your neighbor as yourself. What do you mean as myself? I can't love anybody else like I love myself. But when you say don't do to him what you wouldn't, oh yeah, that I can buy. That I understand. The negative had to be given over in this case for the very simple reason that he wasn't yet an observant Jew. When you become an observant Jew, then you can say, we understand that. Okay? So that's a good question. They all ask that on that particular story. That's the famous story everybody knows. But I want you to focus on the story that comes before that. And this, again, is a repetition of our first Shia, but it's important. Because if you have this next story, which is the story that precedes the story of Yehavta l'recha kamocha, Madasan Loch l'chaver lo savid, that's the whole Torah, the Zil Gemor. The first story is very interesting. The prospective convert comes to Shammai and he says, I will become an observant Jew if you teach me the Torah Shebek Sav, the written law, but I do not accept the oral law. Only the written law. So Shammai says goodbye. Not going to happen. He goes to Hillel. He says, teach me, and I accept, I'll become a firm Jew, but only if you teach me just the written law, not the oral law. So Hillel says, okay, you ready? Today is lesson number 1. What's the lesson number 1? He has 4 letters that he put on a blackboard or on a piece of paper or on a papyrus or on a parchment or whatever was available at the time, or he drew it in the sand. It's whatever. Okay? He puts 4 letters down and he points to the first one. He said, this is an Aleph. Second one, this is a Beis. The third one, this is a Gimel. The fourth one, this is a Daled. That's lesson number 1. Go home and study. Come back tomorrow. Comes back the next day, and Hillel says, okay, you ready for lesson 2? He says, sure. Hillel points to the Daled, and he says, this is the first letter, right? He says, he points to the Aleph. He points to the Aleph, he says, Daled. He points to the Beis, he says, Gimel. He points to the Gimel, he says, Beis, right? So Aleph, he says, Daled. The Beis, he says, Gimel. The Gimel, he says, Beis. And the Daled, he says, Aleph. Just the opposite. Instead of saying Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Daled, he says, this is Daled, Gimel, Beis, Aleph. The guy said, wait a minute, the guy says to Hillel, wait a minute. Yesterday you told me Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Daled, and today you're telling me the same letters as Daled, Gimel, Beis, Aleph? So Hillel says to him, how'd you know I was right yesterday? Huh? How do you know what I told you yesterday is true? How do you know? You don't. But you do if you trust me. You know it. Everybody knows it. And that's passed on orally. What an Aleph is an oral teaching. What a Beis is an oral teaching. What a Gimel is an oral teaching. If you don't have a faith in the Torah Sheba'al Peh, you don't have faith in anything. You don't know anything. You're never going to be able to read, learn, or fathom any system of intelligence. The guy got the message. And he sat and learned Torah Shebek and Torah Sheba'al Peh. We are dealing here with the same issue right now. The Kabbalah HaTorah that Moshe received was an oral explanation of the written law. What's an Aleph? What's a Beis? What's a Gimel? What's a Daled? And the purpose that the Gemara mentions this first is because without this you don't have anything. Okay, so that's a recapitulation of what we did in the first session. But now, what we want to do now is take a look at the Hakdama that's written to the Tanakh, and this Hakdama, this introduction, does a lot for us in terms of spelling out all the generations that received the Torah and that passed it on, and we can pinpoint to exact tradition being passed down from Rebbe to Talmud to next Talmud to the next Talmud down to today, and the Shalshelis doesn't end. Let me give you some examples, okay? In this introduction, he starts out by telling us, okay, what's the Mesorahs? He brings like this. He brings down famous TORAH Rabbanon that is written in a medrash. It said TORAH Rabbanon, Sidran Shel Nevi'im, the order of the Nevi'im. How does it go? Number one, Yoshua, then Shoftim, Shmuel, Melachim, Yirmiyah, Yecheskel, Yeshaya, and Shnei Moshe. We have all these books. All of these books are in our possession. We can get a hold of all of them. What about Ksuvim? The order of the writings that are not part of the Navi itself. What's that? Ruach, Rus, Tehillim, Iyov, Mishlei, Koheles, Shirashirim, the Kinnis of Eicha, Daniel, Umegillas Esther. Esther is part of Ksuvim, written by Mordechai, and Anshe Knesset Hagdola, Ezra, V'divrei Hayomim. This is all from a Gemara in Bava Basra on Daf Yudalid. You can look it up. We have the exact Shalshelis to go on. He's adding that the Rabbeinu Hashkenazim, they found that they not only had the order of all of these Sfarim, but they also put the trup in and the exact annotation and the kudos. Okay. So let's go through what some of the tradition includes. First, the written law. You have Chamisha Chumshei Torah. Then you have Yoshua. You have Yoshua, which tells us all the milchamas with the kings of Canaan and the division of the land of Israel to the 12 Shvatim. And it was written by Yehoshua ben Nun. And it was completed by Pinchas ben Elazar HaKohen, which was the next generation. Shoftim, this tells us what happened in the time of the Shoftim. And this was written by Shmuel Haramasi, also known as Shmuel Hanavi. So we have exactly who wrote what, when it was written, in the order. Moshe, Yehoshua, Shmuel. Then we have the Melachim Aleph and Melachim Beis, which was written by Yirmiyahu Hanavi, who bridged the times of the kings and of this up until the destruction, practically, that Yirmiyah and Yeshaya and Yecheskel spoke about. And then you have Melachim, which included, Melachim you just spoke about. And then you have Yeshaya, all the Nevuah of Yeshaya ben Amos, which was written by Chizkiyahu, Melech Yehuda, and his Chevra. You have Yirmiyah, which he wrote himself, and Yecheskel, which was written by the Anshe Knesset Hagdola, Chagi Zechariah Malachi, Zerubbabel, Mordechai Balshin from, of course, the time of Purim on. Okay. Then you have the Trei Yasar. Now, again, what I'm doing here is I'm just reading off for you. It's just dry and straightforward, but it's important that we all know that the Mesorah goes from Rebbe to Talmud and Rebbe to Talmud and parent to child, just like it does today, and it's extant to us all. And I'll, if you want, I would like to point out that there are books in English of exactly tracing the Mesorah down all the generations to all the Talmidim. Rabbi Zechariah Fendel wrote 3 Svarim that are unbelievable. Anvil of Sinai is one of them. But I forget the other one. But he has an entire bibliography straight down, generation to generation, starting from Moshe Rabbeinu, Avram Avinu really, which we're going to discuss soon too, all the way down, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, then it comes to Moshe, Aaron, and so on and so forth. So you can get all of this information in terms of Moshe Kibel Torah Misinei, Misara Yoshua, and so on and so forth. All this is available. And if anybody wants to read it in the introduction to the Mikros Gedolos Navi, you're more than welcome to do that too. Okay. Now, in addition to the 48 Nevi'im, he has a list. These are all available to us. I'm just trying to point out the Masorah. You have Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Moshe, Aaron, Yoshua, Pinchas, Elkanah, Eli HaKohen, Shmuel and Amosai, and so on and so forth, all the way down till today. All of these things are excellent to us and available for us to see. It's not a problem. So it's important to know that when we speak about Moshe Kibel Torah Sinai, that Moshe received the Torah from Sinai, it's gone through an entire history, down to this day, parent to child, Rebbe to Talmud, just like we're learning now. That's the way it was given over throughout all the generations. Okay. Now, why does it say Moshe Kibel Torah Sinai rather than any other language? And by the way, when it says Moshe Kibel Torah Sinai, that Moshe received the Torah from Sinai, the question was asked before, wasn't this given over to all of Klal Yisrael? Why does it say, it just says Moshe Kibel Torah Sinai u'misara Yoshua? He gave it over only to Yoshua? No! He gave it over to Yoshua and to all of Klal Yisrael, but only by Moshe it says Kibel Torah Sinai. Now, there is an issue with the terminology of Moshe Kibel rather than in every other way. In every other way, we don't find that it says Kibel. There is a Gemara in Kedushin, fascinating piece of Gemara. Every time somebody learns, one of these statements in the Gemara that talk about the Masorah or tell us some of the things about how it came down to us. The Gemara is on Kedushin Lamed Tes Amid Beis. Okay. Why does it say that Moshe Kibel Torah Sinai? Why not? Why not any other language? So the first thing is, we have to know that there are some principles in the Torah that need to be explained. There's a pasuk in Devarim at the end of Parshas Kiseitze that says, "Biyomo titein schoro." Responsibility of a Jew to pay the wages of a person, and by the way, the wording in the pasuk is not just another Jew; it's anyone. I'll give you an exact wording here. It's right at the end, as I said in Parshas Kiseitze. It uses the terminology "biyomo titein schoro." You have to pay the wages on time. And when it talks about paying those wages on time, it uses an expression that is not just relevant to the Jewish people, but it's relevant to everybody. It says, Lo sashok sochir, it's in the Perek Chav Daled, Pasuk Yud Daled. It says, Lo sashok sochir oni ve'evyon. You're not allowed to hold back the payment of a poor person or a destitute person. Meyachecha, whether it's from your brothers, or migercha asher be'artzecha, or any of the gerim that are in your land, bisharecha, living in your gates. Biyomo titein schoro. You have to pay the wages on the day that it's due. V'lo savo olav hashemesh. And you can't let the sun set without paying the wages to the worker. Not just a born Jew. Even a ger asher b'sharecha, not a ger tzedek, just a ger toshav. You have to pay on time. This is a pasuk in the Torah. It's a mitzvah d'oraisa to pay on time. So Chazal come along and ask a question. The question is, Kol Yisrael yesh lehem chelek la'olam haba. All of the Jewish people have a share in the world to come. What does that mean? That we have a share in the world to come? That we're going to get rewarded for the mitzvahs we do in this world, in the world to come. Wait a minute. What about the dictum we just read in the Torah that's a mitzvah d'oraisa? That biyomo titein schoro. You have to pay on the day in which the wages are due. A person does a mitzvah, and he does a mitzvah in olam hazeh, and what are we saying is going to happen with him? He's going to get the reward where? In olam haba. What about payment on time? Biyomo titein sechoro, lo sa'acher l'shalmo, lo savo olav hashemesh. The sun can't set. We're supposed to get it here in this world. Good kasha, no? You're supposed to get it in this world. How come you have to wait until the world to come? So this is one of the questions that is asked on this particular Mishnah. And when talking about this particular Mishnah, he not only brings down this particular statement of Biyomo Titein Choro, but there's a Gemara, which I was about to quote in Kiddushin, where it says, Schar mitzvah b'hai alma leka. Very good. There's no such thing as a reward for a mitzvah in this world. Wait a minute. These two things contradict each other. On the one hand, you're saying you got to pay on time. On the other hand, you're saying, Schar mitzvah b'hai alma leka, that a reward for a mitzvah in this world doesn't exist. How do you feel about that? That a reward for what you did in this world doesn't exist. Schar mitzvah b'hai alma leka. There's no, and the Gemara is not happy with that, by the way. There's a whole discussion on Kedushin, Lamed Tes Amud Beis, about that particular phrase and how it works out. And if you think about it, let's think about this. You help someone and give that person life. Examples? I know someone who donated a kidney. I'm sure you all know people somewhere along the line who donate a kidney to somebody. Here's a young man, he's 40 years old, his kidneys are failing, that's it. There's no hope for him. It's going to be all over in a short time. There's a limited amount of time he can do on dialysis and so on. There's no life. And then someone gives him a kidney, perfect match. And for the rest of his life, although he has to take some anti-rejection medicine, he's basically living a healthy, ongoing, full life. He lives to 90. I don't know if the guy who gave him the kidney will live to 90. We don't know anything about that or more. But he gave life to this person. Can you pay a person a reward for saving a life, for giving a life? Can you possibly in this world give any reward for giving a person life? And it's not just giving a kidney and giving life. I had the experience years ago. I have a Talmud, became a very extremely wealthy person. And I went to visit someone who had just given birth in the hospital, here in Eretz Yisrael. And when I came there was a wall right in front of the maternity building, which had my Talmud's name, and that he donated and dedicated this particular wing of the hospital so that children should be born, because he had parents who went through the Holocaust, and he wanted to help bring Jewish children into the world. And it had his name and his family's name right in front of this building. And I wrote him an email. I said, I want to tell you something. You not only have to be a genius when you're making money, and you not only have to have siyata d'shmaya when you're earning millions of dollars. He's an extremely wealthy person. It's not only that. You have to be a genius in knowing how to give tzedakah. Giving tzedakah to the point where you are now helping Jewish children being born. You're fighting against the Nazis, Yimach Shemam v'Zichram. You donated this maternity wing because you wanted to bring more Jewish children into this world. That zechus is the biggest zechus you can ever have. And when he wrote me back the email, the answer to this, he said, you don't know how you made me feel, he said, because I felt that I'm doing something that Hashem wants, and this is something that you can't ever expect any payment for. You can't. Can you imagine donating $20 million or $30 million in order to get Jewish children being born? What are you going to give this person? What are you going to do for him? What are you going to? I'm taking you out for a steak dinner. What are you kidding? It's ridiculous. There's no reward you can't. It doesn't add up, and it doesn't only go that way. It's more simple than that. You stand in shul, and when it comes to Chazaras Hashatz and the repeating the Shmoneh Esrei, and you're having kavanah on every Baruch Hu Baruch Shmo and Amen, and people are watching you, and they're saying to themselves, you know, I should also do that. I should also stand with kavanah and pay attention to the words and what's being said. And this person goes and becomes someone who pays attention to his or her davening and has more meaning, more input, more value. What are you going to do to pay the original person back for all the people who are copying you because you did the right thing? You refused to talk in Chazaras Hashatz. You gave your kavanah in answering Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo and Amen. You davened with kavanah. You recognize the solemnity of the moment, and you're communicating with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Can you pay that person back? Can you possibly give that person any reward that will equal or make the person acceptable in his life that I've done something? Hashem paid me back. He took me out to this fancy schmancy restaurant. Wow. What are you kidding? It doesn't make any sense. You can't help this person. You can't pay this person in this world. And for a simple mitzvah, the same goes not only for these earth-shattering and life-giving things, but even the smallest thing in the world. You can't possibly pay someone back in this world. And by the way, the converse is also true. When people are wicked and people are evil, you can only kill him once. He's not going to get it. The Keren Kayemes is not going to be here in this world. The Keren Kayemes lo la'olam haba. The evil people of this world, whether it's our current evil chevra, Yimach Shemam v'Zichram, Hamas and all of them, whether it's the Hitlers of the world, Yimach Shemam v'Zichram, or all the just mindless evil people in this world. What are you going to pay them with in this world? What's going to be equal? Nothing. Nothing is ever going to work that way. And consequently, when Moshe kibel Torah miSinai, the question was raised: What about giving me reward in this world? What am I going to do with that? Didn't you say biyomo titein schoro? Didn't you say that the Keren Kayemes is only la'olam haba? What about paying me in this world? So there are a number of answers that are given. One of them is Because Moshe Rabbeinu was Makabel the Torah on behalf of all the Jewish people, that means that he was fulfilling a shlichut, a shlichus. He was acting as an intermediary. And when you act as an intermediary, you're not the one who is getting the reward. You're passing it on. So the reward accrues later. And when Moshe has kibel Torah misinai, it means that Hashem gave it to us through a shaliach. And when there's a shaliach involved, the law of biyomo titein schoro will have to be put in abeyance until the shlichus is fulfilled. And when Klal Yisrael fulfills the shlichus, then we'll see biyomo titein schoro. Then we're going to see that the schar is going to be paid at that time. So that's why it says Moshe kibel, because he was makabel on behalf of Klal Yisrael as our shliach. And that shliach was able to help answer the serious question of what happens with biyomo titein schara. Now, we're really down to the wire over here. I wanted to continue this because there's a lot more going on. Amir Hashem. 5 minutes. Okay, good. I want to introduce a little bit for the next session. Some of the things that we're going to be going through when it comes to Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai. First of all, Pirkei Avot is talking about midos, as we've explained in the first introductory sessions. But we have to know that the shalshelas hamisora, the chain of the giving over of the Torah from generation to generation, is in and of itself one of the most important midos that a Jew has. The midah of making the transition to the next generation. Now, we can't guarantee that the next generation is going to accept anything, because every human being has free will. The proof is that you can go to the most scholarly, the greatest Talmidei Chachamim, you can go to the greatest tzaddikim, and you don't got to go far. You don't got to go far. Avraham had a Yitzchak. He also had a Yishmael. Okay, Yishmael did tshuva at the end. That's true. It's a famous Rashi. In Parshas Chayesara. But Yitzchak had an Esav. Yitzchak had an Esav. Yitzchak and Rivka, the two greatest parents in the world, possibly, they had an Esav. There was no tshuva there. Esav begot Amalek. And unfortunately, in every generation, there have been those who haven't bought into the Masorah, because everyone has free will. And one of the issues that we're going to be dealing with is this very important issue. That when it says in the Mishnah in Peah, the Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam, that the study of the Torah is more valuable and more important than all the other mitzvahs in the Torah. And that's because each and every word and letter of the study of the Torah is in and of itself a mitzvah. So it's not just that you're doing the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, but the Talmud Torah itself is so valuable that when you say 10 words of Talmud Torah, you're not just doing one mitzvah, you're doing 10, maybe 100, and maybe 1,000, maybe even more, especially if you're saying it over to somebody else. You say a Dvar Torah at the Shabbos table. You say a Dvar Torah that took you 5 minutes, not a long time, right? Because if you say more than 5 minutes, everybody starts going, when's dessert coming? So you don't want to say too long. Short and sweet, right? But every word you said is valuable, you know? Every word you said has power. And they said, and there were 5 people at the table, aside from your whole family. And so the 5 people heard and they passed it on and so on and so on and so forth, hopefully using their free will in the proper way. And we're going to deal also, Yetz Hashem, next week. I'm going to bring up a famous Gemara also, Masechta Shabbos, which deals with the issue of why was Moshe the one who is about whom it says Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai, while everybody else was not Kibel. Why is it all hinged on Moshe Rabbeinu? What did he do? What was his schus? Okay, he had a lot of schusim, as we know. You go through the psukim, even from the Torah Shebek Sav, aside from all the midrashim about his greatness. But can you pinpoint one thing which the Gemara says is the crux of the matter as to why Moshe Rabbeinu was the zocher to be Makabel the Torah Misinai and everybody else is Misorah? So Yetz Hashem, we hope next week to be able to deal with that. I'll take 2 minutes for questions if there's any.
Questions?
Any questions? Any comments? Okay, it's not necessary. You don't have to try to put me on trial. It's fine. It's okay. I don't mind. Yetz Hashem, I hope we gain something from this, and we'll continue Yetz Hashem next week. Everyone, of course, is welcome. I want to wish everyone a wonderful, good week, a week in which there's Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam, and we should be Zochet to Kabbalas HaTorah. Of course. I even had something about Purim in here today, but we didn't get to it. So maybe post Purim we can still get to it. Maybe. Don't forget, Purim was a Kabbalas HaTorah. Kimu v'kiblu haYehudim aleim v'al zaram. It says Kimu v'kiblu. There it is. That word, which it doesn't say by anybody else. But in the generation of Purim, it says Kiblu, that they were Makabel. We'll have to discuss that maybe Yetz Hashem next week. Have a wonderful week.